Hey everyone, have you ever finished a meal and thought, "Whoa, did I eat too much?" I think we all kind of have that feeling sometimes. And it's something you guys asked us about, so we're going to do a deep dive today. We're looking at this article called Three Things You Need to Do If You Think You're Eating Too Much. It's from a blog called Grace-Filled Plate, which is all about helping Christian women find peace with food, you know.
It's really interesting how this article, right away, talks about why we might feel this way. And it kind of boils it down to these three things: comparing ourselves to other people, that feeling of being overly full after meals, and the struggle of not losing weight, even if we think we should be.
Yeah, the comparison trap is so real, especially these days. It's like everywhere you look, someone's telling you what they eat or how they work out. The article even mentions those "What I Eat Wednesday" posts on social media, which can be super misleading.
Right. It's like a highlight reel. You only see the healthy stuff, not
Yeah,
like the late night snacking or the times they totally overdid it. You know what I mean?
totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's what can make us feel so bad sometimes. Like we're not doing it right, even if we're actually eating pretty healthy. The article then talks about this thing called diet math, which I used to do all the time. Like I would eat these giant piles of rice cakes
Yeah.
because they were low in calories, but I'd still be hungry afterwards, you know?
Yeah. It's that classic restriction thing. You try to trick your body, but it usually backfires. Our bodies are pretty smart. They crave balance. So when we don't give them the nutrients they need or enough calories overall, we end up feeling even more deprived and out of control.
Totally. It's like your body's screaming, "Hey, I need more than just lettuce here."
Exactly. And then the third point the article makes is about weight loss and how it can be super frustrating when you feel like you're doing everything right, but the scale just isn't budging.
Yeah, that's so discouraging. It's easy to fall into this trap where you think, "Okay, I must be eating too much." And then you restrict even more. But that usually backfires in the long run.
For sure. And the article makes a really good point about that. It says weight is influenced by so many factors,
Mhm.
not just what you eat. There's genetics, hormones, stress levels, your metabolism. Even past dieting can mess with your body's ability to lose weight. So it's not always as simple as calories in versus calories out.
It's way more complicated than that.
Definitely. And that's why I love that the article then asks this question: who gets to decide if you're eating too much?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It basically says you are the expert on your own body. It encourages you to tune into your internal cues and kind of ditch those external rules and restrictions that diets often impose.
I love that idea of reclaiming your autonomy with food. But honestly, isn't it kind of unrealistic to ignore all external advice? Like there's so much information out there about nutrition and what we should be eating.
You bring up a great point. It's not about throwing out all the information you've learned, but it's more about filtering that information through the lens of your own body's needs. What works for one person might not work for another. And this article, since it comes from a Christian perspective, talks about turning to prayer and seeking guidance from God. But even if you don't approach it from that religious angle, the core message is still super powerful. It's recognizing that you are the expert on your own body.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. It's like giving yourself permission to trust your own intuition instead of always second guessing yourself.
Exactly. And the cool thing is the article gives us some practical steps for doing just that. It talks about exercising awareness, observing with grace, and gently realigning with your body's needs.
Okay, that sounds great in theory, but what does that actually look like in everyday life? Like, how do we actually put those steps into action?
Well, the article suggests starting with awareness. So, paying attention to how different foods and portions make you feel.
So basically becoming like a food detective for your own body, gathering all that data on what makes you feel good versus what makes you feel not so good.
Exactly. And this is where the grace part comes in. It's all about observing those sensations without judgment, just noticing what's happening in your body.
Hold on, that grace part really stood out to me. It's like giving yourself permission to simply notice your experience with food without beating yourself up for not being perfect all the time, which I think is such a departure from that typical diet mentality that's all about rules and restrictions and feeling guilty if you mess up.
You're so right. It's about shifting away from that guilt and shame and moving towards a place of curiosity and self compassion. And from that place of grace, you can start to make those gentle realignments with your eating habits.
Okay, so let's talk about those realignments. The article mentions a few specific techniques like adjusting portion sizes, paying attention to your fullness cues, and even slowing down while you eat.
Right. And it even suggests using this tool called a hunger and fullness tracker to help you become more attuned to your body's signals.
I've heard of those. They sound interesting, but I'm not really sure how they work. Can you break that down for us?
Okay, so a hunger and fullness tracker is basically like a scale. It helps you rate your hunger and fullness levels throughout the day. So it usually goes from 1 to 10, where 1 is like, I'm so hungry I could faint. And 10 is like, I ate way too much, I feel sick.
So instead of just like grabbing food whenever you see it,
Yeah.
you actually stop and think, okay, how hungry am I right now?
Yeah, exactly. It's about checking in with yourself before, during, and after meals. And when you do that regularly, you start to notice these patterns. Like maybe you realize you always get super hungry right before your afternoon meeting.
So it's kind of like collecting those little data points we were talking about earlier. The more you pay attention, the more you learn about your own body's rhythms.
Exactly. And the article suggests using this tracker to guide your eating decisions. So for example, aiming to start eating when you're at about a 3 or 4 on the hunger scale.
Which means you're definitely feeling those hunger pangs,
Hmm.
but you're not totally starving.
Right. Yeah. You're hungry, but you can still think straight. And then on the flip side, you aim to stop eating when you're at about a 7 or 8 on the fullness scale.
So you're satisfied but not stuffed.
Right. Like you ate enough, but you don't need to unbutton your pants.
Uh-huh. I like that. That sweet spot between feeling deprived and feeling sick, which I feel like is something a lot of diets get wrong. It's either all about restriction or it's eat until you're uncomfortably full.
Yeah. It's all about finding that balance, which takes some practice and experimentation. Some days you might be good stopping at a 7, other days you might need a little bit more. It just depends.
And the article really emphasizes that this isn't about being perfect. It's about making those gentle adjustments. So if you overeat one day, it's not the end of the world.
Totally. Just notice how you're feeling. Maybe think about what might have led to that overeating.
Right.
And then make a little adjustment the next time. It's all a process.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And speaking of adjustments, the article also talks about slowing down while you eat as a way to better connect with your body's signals.
Ugh, I struggle with that one. I am such a fast eater. Do you have any tips for actually slowing down and enjoying the experience of eating?
I think a lot of us do. We live in such a fast-paced world. It's easy to just scarf down our food without even thinking about it. But when we do that, we miss out on so much.
Like those subtle cues our body is sending us about when we're actually full and satisfied.
Exactly. And then we end up overeating simply because our brain hasn't had time to catch up with our stomach.
That makes sense. So what can we do about it?
Well, there's a few things you can try. Like putting your fork down between bites, really chewing your food, like aiming for 20 chews per bite.
20. Wow. I don't think I've ever chewed anything 20 times in my life.
Uh-huh. It's just an example. But the point is to really bring more mindfulness to the act of eating, to slow down and savor each bite.
So it's not just about what you're eating, but how you're eating it.
Exactly. It's about making eating a more enjoyable experience. And when you slow down, you actually taste your food more. Plus, it gives your digestive system a chance to work properly.
This is all making so much sense. But I gotta admit, I still struggle with those slip-ups, like those times when I way past the point of fullness, or I just make choices that don't really align with my goals. The article talks about handling those moments with grace. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's such an important point. We're all human. We all have those moments where we overeat or indulge a little more than we planned. But the key is to not let those moments derail your whole journey.
So it's not about beating yourself up. It's more about just acknowledging it and moving on.
Right. The article reminds us that slipping up doesn't mean you failed. It's just an opportunity to learn and grow, maybe figure out what triggered that slip up, and then do things a little differently next time.
So instead of getting stuck in that all or nothing mentality, we can be a little more flexible and compassionate with ourselves.
Exactly. And that's where that grace thing comes in again. It's about giving yourself permission to be imperfect.
Yeah.
And to learn from those imperfections without all that judgment.
That takes so much pressure off. It reminds us that this journey of connecting with our bodies is ongoing. It's not about reaching some perfect end goal.
It's about the process.
Exactly. And it sounds a lot like intuitive eating, which we've talked about on other deep dives.
You're right. There's a lot of overlap there. Intuitive eating is all about tuning into your body's cues, rejecting that diet mentality, and making peace with food.
And this article, even though it comes from a faith-based perspective, really echoes those same principles.
Yeah.
It's about trusting your body and realizing that you have this inner wisdom when it comes to food and nourishment.
It's powerful stuff. And the article really drives that point home at the end. It basically says, hey, no external rule or diet can truly tell you what's right for you. You are the ultimate authority on your own body.
That's such a great message. And I think it leads perfectly into the article's final thoughts on reclaiming your intuition and finding peace with food. This whole deep dive has really been about like shifting our focus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like away from all those external rules and diets and back to our own bodies
Yeah.
and like what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah, it's like we've been taught to believe that our bodies can't be trusted, that we need some expert or some book to tell us what to eat and how much. But this article is saying, hey, wait a minute. Your body actually knows what it's doing.
Right. Our bodies are actually incredibly smart. They
Yeah.
have this built-in system for regulating hunger and fullness and all that.
Yeah.
It's just that we've kind of forgotten how to listen.
And that takes practice, you
Yeah.
know? It's not always easy to hear those signals,
Mm.
especially when we've been bombarded with diet culture for so long.
It's like our bodies are whispering, but we've got all this other noise drowning them out.
Exactly. It's like we've been wearing noise-canceling headphones this whole time, blocking out our own internal guidance system. But when we start to quiet that external noise, that's when we can finally start to hear what our bodies are trying to tell us.
I love that analogy. And what I'm hearing from this article is a message of hope. It's
Yeah.
like, it's okay to trust yourself. It's okay to honor your hunger. It's okay to enjoy food. It feels so liberating, especially after feeling trapped by all those diet rules for so long.
And it really aligns with those core principles of intuitive eating, rejecting diet mentality,
Yeah.
honoring your hunger, making peace with food. It's about finding a way to eat that feels good, both physically and emotionally.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on that question. Am I eating too much? It's not about measuring or counting or comparing. It's about trusting my own body and figuring out what feels right for me.
And remember, it's a journey. There will be ups and downs, times when you feel totally in tune with your body, and times when you're like, what am I doing? But that's okay. It's all part of the process.
As long as we approach it with curiosity and kindness and a willingness to listen to our bodies, I think we're on the right track.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up our deep dive today.
It's been great chatting about this with you.
Yeah, I'm walking away with a renewed sense of hope, and I'm excited to keep exploring this whole intuitive eating thing and hopefully help others do the same.
Awesome. And remember, dear listener, you are not alone in this.
If you're interested in learning more about the stuff we talked about today, be sure to check out the show notes for links to the article and some other resources.
And as always, we would love to hear from you. What resonated with you the most? What questions do you still have? You can share your thoughts with us on social media or send us an email. We love hearing from you guys.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, be kind to yourself, trust your body, and keep nourishing your amazing self.